So this is the first talk of this afternoon's Earth GeoTrack, and our speaker for this next talk is Woo-Jung Lee. She's a scientist at the Applied Physics Laboratory at the University of Washington in Seattle, Washington. She has an interdisciplinary background, including undergraduate degrees in electrical engineering and life science from National Taiwan University and a PhD from MIT WHOI, Hui Joint Program in Oceanography. Her research spans two primary areas, acoustical oceanography and animal echolocation, with the goal of advancing acoustic sensing technology to better observe and understand the marine ecosystem. Dr. Lee loves going to sea despite being very prone to motion sickness. Outside of work, she enjoys spending time in the mountains and drawing.
Thank you.
Take it away.
Right. Thank you, everybody, for coming to my talk. What was said there was true. I am terribly prone to seasickness. I don't know. I think I chose the wrong profession. But I really enjoy going to the sea. So, okay. Today I'm going to talk about Echostack. And this is a suite of open source software packages that our team have been developing. So our team is Echospace on the right-hand side, lower right-hand side. You can check out what we're doing in other sort of aspect of our projects. But essentially, this is trying to make processing of echosounder data more flexible and scalable. And I'll go into the details on this. All right, so before I jump in, I just wanted to make sure that we all know what echosounders are, because I realize that different people have different sort of domain experience or completely outside of different domains, right? So echosounders are essentially high-frequency sonar systems, right? So that can let us basically image, do I see, okay, my cursor does show, image the interior of the ocean by pinning the ocean interior with sound, right? So what you are seeing here on the left-hand side is actually a typical scenario where you mount an echosounder on the boat looking downward, right? And what you're doing is you send a sonar pin down, receive the echoes, and you just do it many, many times as the boat travels through. And if you sort of collect the echoes coming back and map them along the sort of the distance you're traveling or the time that you have passed by, and map to the sort of correct depth, right? You end up with this thing that we call echogram, right? So here, the vertical axis is depth, the horizontal axis is distance, right? You can plot it in time as well. So echogram is what we look at in terms of what the data looks like. And the goal of analyzing the data is actually trying to figure out what's in this blob, right? So in this situation, we wanted to know whether are there one fish, two fish, or many fish, or a different type of fish, right? The color don't show up in acoustics though. So, like that doesn't work. There are other ambiguities that, techniques to resolve ambiguities in echosounder data. So that's the broad picture of how echosounder sort of observation looks like. But wanted to show you an example that we think are very cool to basically demonstrate what echosounders can get you, right? So these are data coming from the Ocean Observatories Initiative from a cabled echosounder that is just offshore Oregon here. So we're in Tacoma around here. So it's not very far from here, right? So this is actually an upward-looking echosounder that is mounted on a platform that's 200-meter water depth, right? So it's upward-looking. So if you look at the echogram here, because it's more, right? So the horizontal axis here now is time instead of depth. And the vertical axis is still depth, right? What is cool in this data set was this is a one sort of date of data during this time when there is actually a solar eclipse happening that day, right? So on the top panel here, I'm plotting the shortwave irradiance that is received on a buoy that's actually on top of that mooring, right? So it's pretty cool to see that what you see in this blob here are actually zooplankton or krill. And in a typical day, right, I think some of you are probably familiar with this behavior that's called DL vertical migration, which is the animals go up to the surface to feed during the night, and then as the sun comes out, they will dive back to the sort of deeper part of the ocean to avoid being eaten by visual predators, right? So the animals go do this all the time, day to day. But during the eclipse time, we found that the krill were actually getting fooled, right? And it was very interesting. And this is by no means the first observation of this. People have seen this in the 1970s. But it's cool to see this again, And this was that eclipse in 2017, that happens around here, right? So this was really cool, and I think it gives you an idea. I think this gives you an idea of how the echosounder data looks like, right? So echosounders are pretty much the workhorse of observing marine life in large sort of temporal and spatial scales. They are particularly useful for looking at fish and zooplankton that don't make sound themselves, right? So you probably know that you can put on hydrophones to listen to whales or fish that actually vocalize themselves, right? But there are a whole bunch of other animals that don't make sound themselves. And in those cases, active acoustics or echosounders are very useful. Primarily, those are from sort of mid to higher traffic levels, right? So zooplankton and fish. In the middle, I just wanted to illustrate what echosounder can help in terms of monitoring the marine ecosystem and sort of trying to help us maybe manage the fisheries, right? So here, again, you are seeing the DO vertical migration that you have seen in the previous slide, but instead of looking at 200 meters of water depth, here you are actually looking down to 1,000 meters. Depending on the frequency you are using, you can make your echosounder look further away, right? And you can see that, sorry, these are super tiny here, but in different parts of the world ocean, the DVM behavior can actually change, also according to season, right? So this is pretty cool. And the DVM is actually part of the biological pump that actually keeps the Earth system going. So this is pretty cool. And on the right-hand side, I just wanted to sort of illustrate how this looks like in terms of a fishery survey. They can cover the entire west coast of the US, right? So this is the type of scale we're talking about in terms of echosounder observation. So in the past decade, we have become very good at collecting echosounder data, right? So and again, this is not only for echosounder. I'm sure a lot of domains have this sort of characteristics in terms of data, right? Because we can now deploy echosounders pretty flexibly on different type of ocean observing platforms, from ships to autonomous surface and underwater vehicles, and also on moorings that I showed you earlier from the OOI or the Ocean Network Canada. Right now, we are looking at quite a bit of accumulation on the echosounder data volume, right? So in the past decades, so these are data that has been archived with the NOAA National Centers for Environmental Information. Their archive basically right now have nearly 300 terabytes. These were sometime about 6 months ago. So right now, they have almost 300 terabytes of acoustic data accumulated there. So what do we hope to learn using this type of data, right? To take inspiration, we can look at something like this, right? So on the right-hand side, what you're seeing are mean air temperature difference from the year of 2020 compared to a 30-year mean, 30 sort of before 2010, right? And you can see that most of the places are actually red. And based on this type of observation, we know that our Earth is actually warming, right? So is it possible that using all the volumes of data that we have from echosounders, we can actually derive large-scale patterns or trends in time and space or space so that can help us understand what the marine ecosystem is doing in responding to the changing climate, right? So how do we try to achieve ecosystem acoustics at large scale, right? There are a few scenarios we may want to consider. We probably want our observation to go from a couple of ships to many, many autonomous vehicles, right? We want to scale up from a couple moorings to a network of moorings, right? And we probably want our analysis to go from sort of being within individual groups to across different groups or a community-wide type of collaboration, right? So the key to be able to do this are many folds, right? But 4 of those very important ones are efficiency, consistency, reproducibility, and interoperability, right? And we need good software tools and analysis methods to be able to do this scaling up, right? Our group does both, but for the talk today, I'm going to focus on the software part of it, right? So why do we want new software, right? It's good to take a look at the conventional echosounder data workflows to understand what the challenges may be, right? So what I'm showing here, this diagram basically shows you a typical sort of scenario of analyzing echosounder data, right? So typically the fish will be pinning, right, using echosounders and collect acoustic data. They will also deploy trawls. And these trawls are important because it gives us the biological ground truth to be able to do the inversion problem well, to infer what's in that blob, right, in the echoes, right? Typically, these data are saved into hard drives, and a lot of, or most of the analysis actually happen afterwards, right? So scientists will take this data, aggregate them, look at them, and then do analysis on them, right? And finally come up with acoustically derived biological estimates. And these are things like, biomass and abundance, right? But if you look at things again, most of the software that has been used in this community are mostly GUI-based. A lot of analysis has been done manually. Most of the software packages are platform dependent and cannot take sort of advantage of the cloud scalable type of resources, right? A lot of them are proprietary and can be very expensive. And on top of all that, because a lot of these software packages are built as more like monolithic type of packages that contains a lot of function in a GUI interface, it's pretty hard to interface because often you have to, at both the input and output end, you have to actually experience computing environment change. So you have to export data to a certain format in order to import it in another place, right? So it just adds on to sort of a lot of things you have to do as a researcher. You just want to analyze the data, right? So this is why we want to spend time developing the Echostack, because we want the tools to be open so that anyone can take open data and open code to actually derive information from those, right? We want the software to be scalable in response to data size or different type of computing platforms, right? We want the tools to be flexible and interoperable so that our analysis method, whether it's domain-specific or general type of method, can easily be interoperated with the data set. And we also want the data being produced that can be sort of interoperable with other type of oceanographic data set, right? Because acoustic is just one type of oceanographic data set, right? And we want to be able to share and reproduce the workflow that we have created for our data set, right? So these are by no means only acoustic type of challenges, right? And these are actually common across many domains. And in fact, we are very fortunate this way because we can leverage existing tools people have created for this type of work, right? And on top of all that, we also hope to provide a friendly on-ramp for domain researchers to being able to access or use distributed or computing or cloud computing capabilities easily, right? So I just want to talk about how we design the Echostack, right? So the diagram here has a lot of arrows, but it's essentially a sort of redrawn of what you have seen earlier, right? So again, you have your ship pinning echosounders, collecting acoustic data, deploying trawls to collect biological ground truth for the inversion. But we wanted to make it more flexible, so we organized the data into cloud-optimized, standardized format. And we make it easy to plug in different type of acoustic models, like whether it's empirical models, physics-based models, or machine learning models, and combine those with biological ground truth for the biological estimates, right? And in order to do this, we split this workflow into multiple packages. And I hope in the next few slides I can show you why we did this, right? So we have the EchoPipe package that take care of the data push-pull and the organization part of it. We create echo regions that interface the acoustic data with the analysis results. And the EchoPop package that basically carries through the biological information into the analysis result and spit out the biological estimates. And even though we want to automate as much as possible, there is always the need for interactive visualization so that we know what we're looking at and being able to actually use this type of intuition to develop new methods. So we developed the Echoshader package for interactive visualization. And in order to run this seamlessly, we created the Echo data flow package to orchestrate different type of workflow, right? And it's a configurable type of situation. And in parallel, in order for our data to be reusable and keep good provenance of the data, we define a set of standardized data processing levels, which is called the echo levels, for people to be able to actually look at which stage of their data, which type of processing have the data set been through, right? So Echostack, again, we build on top of what other people have created, right? So on the left-hand side, you are seeing the core dependencies that all of our packages depend on. So we have FFspec, NetCDF, ZAR, Dask, Xarray, Pandas, and many other packages, right? So I'm just listing a lot of those that are very useful for us. On the right-hand side, we also have more specific dependencies for some of those packages. For example, echo regions that does the interface between the data and the analysis masks. We leverage the region mask package. Echo shader depends heavily on holoviz of tools, right? Echo data flow use prefect and pydantic to make sure that we can have good recipes that can orchestrate the data flow. So how do we use it? I'm going to go through 3 use case examples. The first one is day-to-day research use. We use these packages ourselves, and we know some other researchers also use them. We typically use them in the Jupyter environment, so that it's pretty easy to interact with the cloud, organize data set or process new data. And we don't only use Echostack, right? We also use other things in the scientific Python ecosystem, which is great. We can also use them to do mass production of the analysis-ready cloud-optimized data sets, right? So here illustrate one possibility, right? So you can use EchoPipe to basically process your data across multiple stages and then save each of the data product across all these different stages, right? You can orchestrate the workflow with Echo data flow and still keep very good provenance of what your data has been through in terms of processing stages, right? We have partial adoption. Both the NOAA, NCEI, and also the OOI organization have taken the EchoPipe component into their core sort of cloud data ingestion. So we thought that was good. I just wanted to spend some time on this use case example that we are actually currently working on, and it's pretty exciting. So we put together a ship-to-cloud machine learning pipeline with the goal of identifying fish and zooplankton species of the water in the US West Coast. Right now, our machine learning model only deals with Pacific hake. It's a specific type of fish that's very high yield in this local region, right? In the future, we want to scale to other type of animals in the West Coast water. So there are like sardine, anchovy, krill, herring, these different type of animals, right? It is ongoing, like the ship is actually underwater right now, so we're actually working on it like right now. So we have this sort of development and deployment cycle right now. This is the ship that we use, is Bell M. Shimada. This is how it looks like on the acoustic lab in the ship, right? We have our computer, this is our computer. It's a safe edge environment, right? So it has everything. People can go and restart the thing if something doesn't work, right? So it's good, because this allows us to prototype and experiment with different type of schemes and see what is needed in order for us to scale up in the future to many ships and many drones, right? So that's a hope. And this is how we sort of build it together with Echostack, right? And I think by now you have known the color code, right? So again, we push the acoustic data using EchoPipe, interface the machine learning prediction using echo regions, use EchoPub to do the biological estimate, visualize in the cloud using echo shader. So this is shoreside monitoring of what's happening at sea, and then orchestrate the entire thing using echo data flow, right? Right now, on the ship, we are doing the left-hand side of it, right? In the next leg of the cruise, we are going to try to plug in the last part, because that requires us to understand exactly what's happening with their trawls to be able to take those data sort of sub-real time, right? I can't demonstrate in real time many things, but I want to show you some screenshots just to, it's pretty fun to look at. On the left-hand side, you are seeing the status monitoring of the echo data flow through the prefetch dashboard. So it's pretty useful to be able to look at what's happening right now with your pipeline. And this allows us to actually figure out what would fail in a field situation. It has been extremely useful in our case, right? On the right-hand side, we use the echo shader function to find out what the ship has been doing. So we don't communicate with the ship very frequently because they are busy doing their thing, right? But we just take a look at what's going on with our cloud monitoring, right? So this is actually yesterday's track, right? They were actually trying to find hake along the continental shelf break at a place right outside of San Francisco Bay. So this was pretty cool. And here you can see these are the echograms. So again, vertical axis is depth, horizontal axis is time. Anything with color are stuff in the ocean, right? So there is actually quite a bit of animals in the ocean, all these things. And we're happy to talk more about what these animals are. But anyway, we are continuing to build this. We have learned quite a few lessons through this journey, right? We have learned that instrument data is very messy, and it can change, like crazy, depending on different type of configuration, field conditions, or even just typos, right? When you enter the data in, if there is any part that is sort of human entered. Scaling is not trivial. Even a simple group by operation, if you work on a very large data set with irregular time or space indices, the computational cost is pretty high. It takes quite a bit to maintain the packages to keep up with dependencies. I'm sure the community knows really well. It's also really important for us to be able to communicate to the stakeholders and the community so that we can get community buy-in, because we need funding to keep on going, right? So we are still learning this. But going forward, what we wanted to do is to continue enhance the Echostack functionalities, performance, and also the documentation. And at the same time, cultivate community engagement so that we can have more discussions and potentially have co-contributions from the community. We have some, but it's definitely not to the scale where we hope to have, right? So our hope is to be able to enable this feedback between the two so that these stack of tools can continue to develop. So ultimately, what we hope to do is to catalyze community-wide collaboration and workflow transformation through these tools, right? These tools are not the end of it, right? Like ultimately, we want to have better method, but we view the software tools as part of it to be able to scale up. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I wanted to thank all of you for coming to the talk, and also my collaborators, so colleagues in the eco space and the eScience Institute. A lot of them are actually here because we're sort of local. So, go talk to them about the packages. And also our colleagues and collaborators in the NOAA Northwest Fisheries Science Center, the Fisheries Engineering and Acoustic Technology team. They have been instrumental to sort of work with us on what are different priorities and the setup they have in the field. And they are the people who are on the water right now, so it's great. We also want to thank our funding agencies. Without funding, we can't continue this work. So thank you.
Alrighty, we'll open up for questions. Any questions? Also encourage virtual folks. You can go ahead and drop it in the Slack channel, the track, ocean, geo, so on. Any questions?
Thank you so much. This was super interesting to see. I was curious how you identify specific types of marine life.
So there are multiple ways, but the easiest one that we use a lot is to look at how the echo changes in different frequencies. So in a way, it's similar to hyperspectral images from satellites, right? The same sort of idea. So in different frequencies, you see the same thing differently. So by looking at multiple sort of band or frequencies, you can distinguish them. So that's one of the, I guess, most used method.
I had a question. So how'd you decide what to put into each own package? Like I know you showed like Echo and all the different packages. Like what was the motivation for sort of separating it into all those different packages versus sort of one big package?
Yeah. Some of those turn out to be, some of those is because the dependencies are very hard to manage if for example, if we want HoloViz to be part of EchoPipe, something will explode, right? So it's much easier to keep them separate. Some of those is actually related to how the packages came about, right? So we developed, EchoPipe was the first one being developed, but we keep on finding needs for additional functionalities. And when we find the needs to be sort of separable, we're like, for example, between the EchoPop, which is, I forgot to explain, POP is population. That's where the biology comes in, right? So we're thinking this is really taking biological data with acoustics, right? So it makes sense to sort of break it off. That also gives us, that sort of break off the sort of different type of functional grouping, also give us the flexibility of interfacing with other tools, right? For example, the part in EchoPop has the acoustic inversion, right? And there are many different ways to do inversion. We probably don't want to stuff them in the same package, right? So being able to do that separately is nice. Yeah, but who knows? We might actually have to refactor. I hope not majorly, but we'll see. Yeah.
You showed some data that I heard you to say came off a ship yesterday.
Yep.
So is there some sort of ship-to-shore telemetry, so you're doing all this processing on land? What is that telemetry?
That is Starlink right now. So so NOAA ships are upgrading their sort of cloud or internet connection. Before it was the satellite link. So we almost always had internet, I guess at least in the past sort of 10, 15 years. But right now they're upgrading to Starlink, which was a pretty interesting experience, right? It has dropouts, but when it connects, it's pretty fast. So, yeah. But yeah, in the prefect, we actually sometimes see all the surface being not ready because they're offline. So
These sorts of, these sorts of files are pretty beefy, right? What have you had to do to deal with that?
We are pretty lucky in the sense that this first batch that we're dealing with right now from the ship are smaller ones, but we're actually going to deploy on this other ship next week, and that one is going to be much larger, like sort of 10x larger. The average file size we deal with right now are sort of 100 megabytes, and then the whole day is actually accumulate to maybe a few gigabytes. But for this other ship, because they set up the instrument differently, every 15 minutes they generate 2 gigabytes. So that becomes a completely different scheme. And I feel like that's the place where what do you do at the edge and what do you do on the cloud becomes an important decision. But right now, we are doing most of the computation at the edge, right? So as long as that local computer on the ship is powerful enough, we think it's okay. But who knows, if the bandwidth is large enough, there can be a scheme to actually push all the data to the cloud and just do all the processing there, right? Then we are not limited on local resources. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, so sorry, this isn't much about Python, but I'm from meteorology, and with weather radars, we do what's called polarimetric observations, where you fire one beam horizontally and one beam vertically. Do y'all do the same thing with sounders? Like, do you guys change the orientation of like the sound waves? And
not in these ones. So
Okay.
the standard fisheries echosounders, they have this split beam system, but essentially is you're doing beamforming directly on sort of 4 sectors. But in other type of system like multi-beam systems, you can sort of do separate things. But acoustic waves don't have the polarization as EM waves.
Gotcha.
So that actually changes things dramatically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How did you decide on using HoloViz for visualization?
I don't know. Sorry, because we saw, great demos, right? We're like, oh, let's give it a try. But of course, it's been a pretty bumpy road, to be honest, right? Because there are some things that we wish it was existing in a certain way, it doesn't. But a lot of it is also us trying to understand how to use it better, right? In what tool. But there's, at least for our current experience so far, being able to visualize very large data set continue to be a challenge, right? Like we see a lot of lags in trying to do it, but maybe we're not doing it correctly. So it'd be great to talk to folks here to be like, are we doing it correctly? So, yeah.
Thanks, really nice talk. It's really nice to see how sort of modular you've managed to make it all as well. I guess one thing I was wondering is, to what extent does your sort of prefix, echo, etc., rely on standardizing all your data according to some like common schema? My understanding is that like lots of oceanography vessels in like various subfields of oceanography are like really, really bad at standardizing the data outputs that they come back with. Like I was at a workshop the other day where someone was saying they like manage data from like 30 ships and they have 30 different data formats. So I guess I wonder if you comment on whether or not you have, do you have like your own sort of schema that you follow for these like cloud optimized ZAR stores, or like what's involved there?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me switch back because I think that will maybe help. Sorry for flopping. But one thing that I didn't talk about was actually, part of the reason why we did this was essentially to convert data from different instruments into the same type. And within the fisheries acoustics or ocean acoustic community, this is not new, but it can also be said to be new. So there has been sort of different sort of conventions that have been proposed, right? So there was a convention before that actually multiple software systems actually operate on, but that was not a NetCDF format. So about 6 years ago, like 2018, a group actually came up with a NetCDF convention, which helped significantly. And that was around the time when we actually first started to try to develop EchoPipe, right? So when I was first writing the code, I was like, I don't know what to use. I saw this came up. I was like, okay, let me do this, right? But the convention keep on evolving. So it becomes a, I guess, try to catch up situation.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.